Welcome to the Friday Casebook, the show where we look at the latest events in Europe and the world. I'm going to talk to Roger Casale, the founder of New Europeans. And yeah, I'm Lena, a freelance journalist and moderator. And Roger, I'm curious, who or what is the elephant in the room?
Hi, Lena. Great to see you. And this week we have a real elephant in the room. I was wondering when we could get this onto the show. It's the knitted elephant. And the significance of this is that it was knitted by the EU's competition commissioner, Margrethe Vestager, also a former winner of the Schwarzkopf Award. And this year's Schwarzkopf Foundation celebrates its 50th anniversary. She has as one of her hobbies knitting. She says that it helps her to focus, and I know how popular knitting is, and Margrethe Vestager, as well as being a very effective commissioner, I'm sure is also very popular. And I just wonder if this idea of knitting at work was maybe President Erdogan and his staff got muddled up between Margrethe Vestager, the competition commissioner, and the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, when Ursula von der Leyen and the president of the European Council, Charles Michel, went to visit. And perhaps he thought it was Ursula von der Leyen who was the commissioner who liked knitting, which might be one of the reasons he put her on the sofa. There is Ursula von der Leyen on the sofa, and there is Charles Michel and President Erdogan on the chairs. And of course, this gave rise to a huge diplomatic scandal, and rightly so, that Ursula von der Leyen wasn't given equal status to Charles Michel. Charles Michel looked very sheepish in the video of this affair. Presumably there was some sort of fanfare of music as they went into this ceremonial hall for the meeting, and then the music stopped and Charles Michel thought he was playing a game of musical chairs and ran straight for the chair next to Erdogan, leaving Ursula von der Leyen to sit on the sofa. It's interesting that the former president of the Commission, Juncker, waded into this row last week, saying that he also, when he was president of the Commission, had to sit on a sofa. And it may be to do with the fact that Ursula von der Leyen is president of the Commission, and therefore they thought diplomatically she wasn't as important as Charles Michel. But given Erdogan's well-known views about the role of women in society, and of course he's just, as we covered on the Friday Casebook, come out of the Istanbul Convention, it was obvious that this was going to come across as the men having the serious conversation and the women being left out of it, which was absolutely scandalous. And poor Charles Michel got dragged into this, looked as if he was being complicit. I can only suggest that Ursula von der Leyen's bag carrier, whoever that is, presumably she's got an entourage of 2 or 3 people, high-level diplomats who go around with her carrying her papers and things when she goes to these meetings, as well as taking her bag, also takes one of these with her. I found this very useful in the past. I'm a little bit too heavy now to sit on this, so I can give it to Ursula von der Leyen and her team. And then she's got her own chair and she just can sit down next to whoever she wants to and make sure that she's part of the conversation.
What else sparked your interest this week, Roger?
It's been actually the rest of the world a very tragic events. We think about what's happening in Myanmar. We think about what's happening in the United States with the shooting of Dawn Wright by a female police officer. And also here in Europe, there have been very tragic events. And I'm thinking in particular of the execution-style murder of an investigative journalist in Greece, a very well-known, very much respected and well-loved journalist called Georgios Karavaias. He had a daily show, actually, on Greek TV, and he was on his way home from the studios, and 2 gunmen approached him on a motorbike and shot him 10 times. It's an example, really, of how fragile our democracy is in Europe. I mean, not only is this a terrible event in itself, but we as citizens rely on the information that we get from Georgios Karavas and other journalists to be able to understand what's going on. And we cannot have freedom of the press unless there is an end to impunity for crimes against journalists. And so may Georgios Karavas, rest in peace, and may the Greek authorities pursue the perpetrators and bring them to justice, because not only will that be justice for Georgios, that's also the way to make sure that we protect our democracy.
Who is on the naughty step this week?
Well, on the naughty step this week is the former British Prime Minister David Cameron. There's David Cameron holding his nose, but we should all be holding our noses, because it turns out that he's been lobbying the government to try to get a multi-million-pound loan for one of his consultancy clients, a company called Greensill, Lex Greensill, run by a Australian which finances supply chain companies in the UK, and got into trouble during COVID. And Cameron approached high-level contacts, including the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, to try and get a special loan. And of course, what makes this all the more special in a way as a story, in inverted commas, is that as Prime Minister, David Cameron spent a great deal of time lecturing people about how they shouldn't be involved in this nasty business of lobbying. He said, we all know how it works. Well, he's putting that knowledge to good use, it seems, and he has boasted of millions of pounds that he's earning through this contract. And it's the sheer hypocrisy, I think, of what he said in government and what he's done subsequently that really hurts. But of course, the British government has established a reputation for sleaziness and having close contacts between members of the government and companies, for example, that are profiting from the COVID pandemic through winning contracts to produce masks and protective equipment and so on. We've already covered that in relation to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. So this shows David Cameron in a very poor light, but it's also part of a pattern, I think, of how close this government is in the UK to private interests and private companies who creating a kind of vicious circle whereby companies fund the Conservative Party, the Conservative Party uses that money to get into power, and then when it's in power, it acts in a way which favours the interests of those private companies. At least these are the allegations.
After these rather dark news, you know, Roger, I like to look for some bright spots. So who's our star of the week?
Well, when it gets very dark, it's time to light candles. And in France, they also light candles when it gets very cold. And it was very cold at the beginning of April, so cold that in some parts of France, in Burgundy and in the south of France, there was real concern about the vintage, the wine vintage, next year's wine vintage, because the vines were in danger of freezing. They were going to have what's called a black frost, which is where the actual vines, the tissue of the vines freezes, not just snow and ice on the outside of the vines, but actually inside, which can really destroy the crop. And the response to this is wonderful. The French farmers and the vintners and so on, they light candles, they light little fires to try and keep the cold away from the vines. And I think this is a wonderful metaphor of what we need to do to protect our democracy. Each of us has the opportunity to make our voice heard, to bring our voice to the debate, to light our candle, to protect democracy. And I think that image, to me, sums that up very well.
There's one question left. What's coming up? Well,
this connects quite well with the previous story, because on the 22nd of April, there's going to be a global climate summit that's been called by US President Joe Biden to coincide with Earth Day, which is celebrated every year. And he's invited 40 world leaders. The European ones who are going include Ursula von der Leyen, I'm pleased to say. I hope she remembers to take her chair with her, although I'm sure she won't need that when she goes to see Joe Biden, but she'll probably be talking to him on Zoom, I suspect, so it won't be an issue. She can sit where she likes. And Macron and Merkel, and also the Prime Ministers of Italy, Spain, and Poland, as well as leaders from all over the world. On Earth Day, everyone perhaps could think about something that they could do, just once again to light their candle to for the climate. Perhaps don't literally light a candle if that's going to contribute to global warming, but metaphorically light a candle. Make your voice heard. Do something for the climate, not just on Earth Day, but every day.
Thank you very much, Roger, for this Friday Facebook. And the audience, please don't forget to subscribe to our New Europeans YouTube channel and help our movement, the civil rights movement, to grow. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lena. See you next week.